have to remind ourselves it's Good Friday. Traditionally, this square would be packed. Dramatic images marking the end of another surreal week. The cross carried by prisoners and the doctors and nurses battling Italy's fight. The Pope surrounded by very few on this holy day. But on this Good Friday, the country still warning that this crisis is not over. It has been the deadliest stretch of days yet here in the U.S. as Americans continue lining up for food. A new warning tonight from the FBI. While so many are taking this time to help, others are using it to cash in. And we're keeping an eye on the future, the cutting-edge work now underway as we begin to think about what life will look like when it returns to some semblance of normalcy. Good evening, everyone. I'm Lindsay Davis. Thanks so much for streaming with us, and happy Good Friday, a solemn day in the Christian faith commemorating a dark and bleak event. But more than that, it celebrates hope, something we've been trying to celebrate regularly here. And while this is no doubt a dark time for so many, we are starting to see more beams of light shining through the darkness. In Paris, the charred Notre Dame Cathedral opening to the world again, if only for a fleeting moment. The Archbishop of Paris saying life is still here. And in hard-hit Italy, life is inching back to normal. Officials today announced some shops will reopen next week. And back in the U.S., many say that the key to reopening this country and getting millions back to work relies on promising new testing to see who has had the virus and cannot infect others. Unfortunately, the death toll worldwide did top 100,000 today. But here in New York, after a painful week, at long last, the curve may be flattening. Governor Cuomo said today, while social distancing is a grind and it's difficult, we have to stick with it. Our Whit Johnson leads us off.
Tonight, inside these hard-hit ICUs, finally a promising sign. For the first time since the outbreak began in New York, more people leaving those intensive care units than going in. The rate of hospitalizations down.
As someone who searches for solace in all this grief, the leveling off of the number of lives lost is a somewhat hopeful sign.
The death toll slightly lower, but appearing to hold steady at a staggering loss. 777 people dying in the last 24 hours. Morgues filling so quickly, crews are now digging more space at Hart Island, the city's cemetery used to bury unclaimed bodies. The crisis also playing out in maternity wards. We were taken inside by Maimonides Hospital in Brooklyn, the scare of a lifetime for Iris Nolasco. Diagnosed with COVID-19, 30 weeks pregnant, doctors ordering an emergency C-section.
I just prayed to God to protect my baby and the people that I had at home. I thought that I would die then.
Her next memory special but short-lived. The sound of her baby girl crying. But doctors immediately separating the two, taking the newborn away to the NICU to shield her from the virus.
The only way I've seen my baby is through a camera, and I was able to open it 24/7 and see how my baby's doing, breathing, smiling sometimes, yawning.
Iris connected to her daughter through a baby monitor only. Little Isabella Michelle, still in the hospital, but improving. Iris is now recovering at home, hoping their first official meeting is just days away.
I just hope that I'll be able to hold her and then just protect her. Once this is over, I just want to spend every second with her and create that bond that we are missing now.
Tonight, as we've been reporting, a terrible toll on African Americans in this country. And in New York City, 34% of coronavirus deaths in the Latino community. For millions of Americans, life on hold. But the message, stay home and stay the course.
It's really about the encouraging signs that we see, but as encouraging as they are, we have not reached the peak.
But still an emergency in so many cities. Today, the Detroit Convention Center turned field hospital now treating COVID patients. The state now taking more drastic steps, banning travel between homes starting tomorrow.
Our most vulnerable citizens are dying in a helpless manner.
In Maryland, the governor warning there are tough days ahead.
We are ramping up the curve. This is going to be one of our most dangerous times ever this weekend and over the next week or so.
But in Florida, which was slower than other states to order restrictions, the governor considering reopening schools in May and saying this.
This particular pandemic is one where I don't think nationwide there's been a single fatality under 25. For whatever reason, it just doesn't seem to threaten, kids.
But the CDC saying at least 8 people under 24 have died in the U.S., states reporting 2 infants, 2 teenagers, and young adults among the victims, like 22-year-old Israel Sows, who died a short time after he and his wife welcomed a new baby. Tonight, the White House confirming the president is creating a task force focused on reopening the country, saying he'll announce early next week members of the medical and business communities will help decide how to move forward.
And I've got to make the biggest decision of my life. And I've only started thinking about that. I mean, I've made a lot of big decisions over my life. You understand that. This is by far the biggest decision of my life because I have to say, okay, let's go. This is what we're going to do.
But on the front lines, the battle continues to save lives. Right here yesterday, we met nurse Mary-Kate Finero, working in the same Brooklyn ICU where her father, a physician, was being treated for COVID-19. She was caring for others, not him. Difficult for both.
Unfortunately, I was not ever able to go inside of his room, so I didn't want to cross-contaminate between other COVID-19 patients and him, so I waved to him from outside of the glass.
Today, her dad, Dr. Richard Finero, is out of the hospital, and like so many healthcare workers, jumping back in the fight to beat this virus.
When you were in the ICU and you saw your daughter on the other side of the glass, was there ever a moment you wondered you might not make it?
I had many moments like that. In fact, at least 2 days worth. I just could not breathe. Quite frankly, I was frightened. But on top of that, to see my daughter at the same time was very difficult.
Love to see those stories of recovery. Whit Johnson joins us now. Whit, the president was asked about new federal projections looking at what would happen if stay-at-home orders were lifted after just 30 days. What was his response?
Lindsay, those projections by federal agencies reported by the New York Times would show a dramatic spike in infections if those orders were lifted. The president saying he hasn't seen them, but that he would listen to his medical experts and in the end make his own decision. Lindsay?
Whit Johnson for us back on this beat tonight. Thanks, Whit. As the fight against COVID-19 rages here in New York and hotspots across the country, there are a few pockets where the coronavirus is very much out of sight, out of mind. Our Kana Whitworth went to a town called Washington City in Utah, where it's still business as usual for some.
The 405 in Los Angeles is utterly empty, yet the roads here in Southwest Utah are totally jam-packed.
Businesses still open, hitting the links with friends. They feel like long-gone luxuries when so much of the country is locked down. But in Washington City, Utah, this is still daily life.
You don't feel like you want to wear masks or gloves?
No.
You feel safe?
Yeah, I do. We have hand sanitizer in the car and we're good. I feel safe. I mean, yeah, you don't touch your face, but I don't know.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what you do anyways.
So you guys just invited me to come party with you?
Absolutely.
Are you partying like normal?
This is our routine.
You can see people enjoying lunch behind me in a group. They say that's different because they're not in a restaurant, but they're outside together. Behind me, you can see there's a cigar shop that is open for business, a nail salon where you can go get a manicure or a pedicure. They say they're letting fewer people in at a time.
Don't be a sheep. That's my policy. Everyone's a sheep right now, and they say wear a mask. People put a mask on. Don't be a sheep. Research, educate yourself. Education is a powerful tool.
But countywide, they only have 35 cases here and 1 death. Lacey Priest, who owns and operates a barbershop in neighboring St. George, has stayed open for haircuts and beard trims.
And we're doing everything we can to keep it clean and safe, and I don't see why we shouldn't be open.
For Lacey, it's life after the coronavirus that she's more concerned about.
We need to go on and live day to day still, after this is all over and done with. There's still going to be life. If I close my doors, I don't know if I'm going to be here when it's time to reopen them. So just being here and being cautious and being aware of our surroundings and the people that we're inviting into the shop.
Restaurants are doing takeout only, and some retail shops only allowing curbside pickup. But Joann Fabrics letting in 20 people at a time. Most residents move around freely without masks or gloves.
I think for a lot of people in Washington City, their lives haven't changed that much.
I agree.
City leaders encourage social distancing and only essential travel. Utah is one of 9 states without statewide shelter-at-home restrictions, but the governor has extended a stay-at-home directive to May 1st. Local leaders in Washington City claim the virus is not spreading by community transfer, and they want to keep it that way.
And Kana joins us now from Utah. Kana, the governor of Utah did announce some travel restrictions earlier today, right?
Yeah, Lindsay, so starting today, any adult that enters the state will be required to fill out a health form. So if you fly in, you'll do it at the airport. If you drive in, you'll receive a text message asking you to fill out this form. Government leaders want to know if you've had any symptoms, if you've been tested, and where you've been traveling. And the governor warns some people might have to be quarantined.
And talk us through the overall rules in Utah, because some cities in that state are locked down at this point.
Right, so they're doing it county by county. So leaders in more densely populated areas like Salt Lake County, for example, they've implemented their own restrictions, but the governor hasn't issued a statewide decree, which is why you're seeing people here in Southwest Utah move about quite freely, Lindsay.
Kana, thank you for that report. It's so interesting to actually see people out and their daily life, daily routine at parks and nail salons. It's images that people like us here in New York, we just haven't seen for so long. So a really eye-opening report there.
Of course. Yeah, thank you, Lindsay.
Now to a grim milestone. The number of coronavirus deaths around the globe is now more than 100,000, something that we could repeat again. More than 100,000 people have died from the virus in just the last few months. And things are particularly bad in the United Kingdom. Nearly 1,000 people dead since yesterday, the deadliest day in that country so far. But while the UK continues to struggle, Prime Minister Boris Johnson appears to be getting better. ABC's James Longman brings us the latest from London.
Tonight, officials acknowledge Boris Johnson is only in an early stage of recovery. News that he's now been able to do short walks between periods of rest suggests how serious his condition was. A spokesman saying he waved to doctors and nurses as he was moved out of the ICU. But this morning, Johnson's father painting a grim picture.
To use that American expression, he almost took one for the team.
Saying his son is still not out of the woods. And not far from where Boris Johnson recovers, gratitude for health workers on the front line. But the British government will also be conscious of growing anger. 980 dead announced in the past 24 hours, higher even than Italy on its worst day. At the Vatican, the Pope leading the faithful into a very different Easter weekend, preaching this Good Friday in a near-empty St. Peter's Square. His prayers for strength and compassion now seem especially poignant.
Our thanks to James for that update. And we talked to Whit about this earlier. Take a listen to what President Trump said when he was asked what will drive his decision on when to reopen the country.
You say, sir, what metrics you will use to make that decision?
The metrics right here. That's my metrics. That's all I can do. I can listen to 35 people. At the end, I've got to make a decision. And I only hope to God that it's the right decision. But I would say, without question, it's the biggest decision I've ever had to make.
And joining us now is ABC News contributor Tom Bossert, who served as Homeland Security Advisor for President Trump. Tom, so much discussion this week on what kind of progress we've made in flattening the curve. What are you seeing that's promising, and what still concerns you about our progress as a country?
Yeah, hi, Lindsay. So the promising data suggests that we've succeeded in so-called flattening the curve, right? But the troubling thing is that we keep aggregating, some of us, that data, and it leads to what we just saw, where people are seeing such a fundamentally different story in places like New York and Utah. You know, New York City's got over 8 million people in it, and they've got over 170,000 cases in New York State. 80% of them are in New York City. Utah's got 2,000 cases in the entire state. And the entire state is so sparsely populated that the whole state only has 3 million people. And so when we start drawing conclusions that apply to Utah from our situation in New York, we run into these problems. And I think where the president needs to be careful when he talks about making a decision, it's not a decision. I would encourage him to make a set of recommendations, kind of a policy framework that would drive us to opening up in a localized fashion so that we can account for that differential.
And the president was dismissive yesterday of the notion of widespread testing across the country. Can this virus be contained if we don't have that extensive testing as well as contact tracing to see where the disease continues to spread?
Yeah, so there's all these different layers and levels, right? So we can suppress it, we can mitigate it, we can outright contain it, but it would probably cause too much of a problem to our economy. The trick is finding that set of middle grounds. And I think the answer here is not going to make people happy, but it's a tedious attention to this detail over the entire summer where you have to start taking these scarce resources in tests and applying them in a very careful way. Ideally, we test everybody, but we just can't do that. And so we're going to have to test those that have symptoms. And I think that the big change is going to have to be supported and I think articulated and led by the federal public health officials is to change what they call these person of interest or the person under investigation, standards. It can't just be the really ill anymore. I think we're going to have to move at some point here in the few weeks ahead into a standard in which we test anybody with any symptoms and use that as a bellwether to figure out where these different outbreaks are occurring. And then we have to start tracing and isolating. And otherwise, we'll never get back. And if we do that and we do it smartly, we can get back to work in a careful way.
And you've said before, Tom, that the virus will still be here on May 1st, and we can't run out then or we'll risk causing a second outbreak. So what are the key steps that you think that we still needed to take in order for us to consider the process of starting to open things up again? And also looking at where things stand now, what's the time frame that Americans should be thinking about?
Yep, so that's just it. There'll be different time frames in different places. Utah and New York will be different. And then the key is to prioritize the scarce resource of tests. We don't have enough, and this is the problem we had the first go around, where we didn't have enough tests and we were waiting for data. We can't wait for perfect data. We're gonna have to make decisions on good enough data. So there are things that kind of test for flu-like symptoms, right? We call it an ILI-net, this syndromic surveillance system that we have where all the emergency departments and doctors' offices report people that have flu-like symptoms. Well, let's just start assuming that reports of flu-like symptoms for public health purposes are indications of outbreaks in different cities and towns. Treat that seriously and prioritize our tests to people that are sick there so we can grab hold of new outbreaks and clamp them down without having to do what we did the first time, which was a total nationwide clamp down. That's the thing that kills our economy, and it also undermines people's trust in their officials as they seem to be getting advice that doesn't apply to their locality.
And you saw in Kana's piece earlier the different parts of the country are responding differently to this pandemic. How concerned are you that we're going to see outbreaks in areas that have not prepared enough for this?
Yeah, I'm concerned about three things. If the president gives an all clear as if it's one decision that applies to the whole monolithic country, then all the horses come out of the barn at once, and we're going to have a re-outbreak somewhere and maybe multiple places. And then the second thing I'm worried about is what you heard in that undertone from that really good reporting out of Utah. People not just not listening, but being very skeptical of people that, in some way, in their experience, seem to be overreacting. So the idea here is to prioritize tests, localize decision-making, and to be careful that we don't run blindly back into a virus minefield of people that can be sick, but don't know it, and they're asymptomatic but infectious. That'll restart this thing, and that'll hurt our economy all over again.
Tom, I want to ask you a question that's a bit beneath your pay grade and requires maybe a little bit of a crystal ball, but it's something that people are curious about. Like, let's say here in New York, people who are planning a wedding or some kind of big family reunion in like the July or August timeframe. Are those things that you would say, hey, you guys should just go ahead and cancel that now, don't plan on that, or it's still a possibility?
That's not below my pay grade at all. Those are the biggest questions on everyone's minds. We're going to have to start planning for coming back into those social gatherings, not just into our business functions. And that's why, among other things, I'm going to tell people they don't want to hear it, but masks are a really important layer in this effort. We saw the Czech Republic perform better than any other country in Eastern Europe because they just adopted and they made it cool to wear masks. Remember, the mask is for all of us that don't feel sick, and it kind of diffuses the mind, if you will, in the virus minefield. If we can add masks to this, I think people can start having their weddings and social gatherings a lot more than they think, or a lot sooner than they believe.
All right, Tom Bosser-Forrest, thank you so much, as always, for your insight. We appreciate it. And today, of course, is Good Friday, a solemn spiritual day, in normal times steeped in ritual and community. But as we enter this holy weekend, for many, worship will be strictly between the individual and their God. Our Terry Moran reports.
On this Good Friday, the darkness seems deeper. Look at St. Peter's Square in Rome tonight, usually thronged with Holy Week pilgrims, eerily almost empty. Only Pope Francis presiding, while a small group, including doctors and nurses, prayed the Stations of the Cross, an ancient devotion that marks the suffering and death of Jesus on the cross.
Per Cristo nostro Signore.
Amen. O God, do not leave us in the darkness and shadow of death, the Pope prayed. Across the world, no great solemn ceremonies anywhere, no emotional processions through cities and towns, even in the Holy Land. Just a few of the faithful gathering. At the Cathedral of Notre Dame in Paris, still gutted by last year's terrible fire, a service held in a side chapel captured the loneliness and the ruin of this year's Good Friday around the world.
Du Fils et du Saint-Esprit. Amen.
If the coronavirus pandemic seems to have sharpened people's sense of mortality and dread, for Christians, the true meaning of Good Friday is ultimately revealed on Easter Sunday in the celebration of Christ's resurrection. New York's Cardinal speaking from his residence.
That's how Jesus works. He turns our sufferings into healing. He turns evil into good. He turns death into life. And we got to remember this Good Friday.
In the U.S., a few church leaders are still defying lockdown orders and planning to hold Easter services.
They're trying to take down our great nation by shutting the doors to the church, but we will not let them. Nothing is going to detour that Easter Sunday service from occurring.
Some churches are finding a middle ground, MacGyvering church, you might say, like this German pastor who took over a drive-in movie theater for services, worshipers staying in their cars, listening on car speakers. But most churches will remain closed, most of the faithful at home. In some ways, like the first Christians, who remembered Jesus' words, wherever 2 or 3 are gathered, there am I. Terry Moran, ABC News, Washington.
There am I in their midst. And when we come back, while so many are doing good deeds, there are bad actors. Tonight, the FBI warning about some trying to fraudulently cash in on the coronavirus. What you need to know. And with so many remote learning and some school districts shutting down for the year, as parents struggle to keep up, are students really getting the education they need? Plus, our weather team is warning of a potential major severe weather outbreak this weekend.
ABC News, straightforward.
You've likely seen some of those texts warning about coronavirus fraud. Well, tonight there are new warnings from the FBI and FTC about a dramatic spike in schemes, specifically ones that prey on our fears of the coronavirus. ABC's Chief Justice correspondent Pierre Thomas on what you need to know.
Tonight, a stark warning from the FBI as thousands of American consumers say they've been the target of COVID-19 scams. The FTC reporting today more than 15,000 complaints, nearly doubling the number recorded last week. Almost $12 million in losses and counting.
I'm Keith Middlebrook.
The FBI making arrest after arrest, including Keith Middlebrook.
I've created
the cure for COVID-19, the coronavirus. This is it right here.
There is no cure, and Middlebrook has been arrested and charged with attempted wire fraud, accused of advertising a false claim to lure investors.
This influenza.
And tonight, the state of Missouri is suing televangelist Jim Bakker after his TV show promoted a silver solution cure for COVID-19, a potion in a bottle that you could buy for $80. Bakker's company says it was his guests who touted the product, but they have stopped offering it. The litigation is pending. And then there are those suspect robocalls.
We can qualify you to get a free diabetic monitor and a complimentary testing kit for coronavirus.
And websites promising to deliver a coronavirus vaccine for a fee when no such vaccine exists.
We're joined now by Pierre Thomas. We're all spending a lot of time at home and online, and there are a lot of messages that are coming at us. So how should we protect ourselves from these bad actors?
Lindsay, folks at home should ignore online offers for cures, vaccinations, and home test kits. Some of this stuff can be dangerous. They should hang up on robocalls, never donate in cash by gift card, or wire money to people selling COVID-19 products, Lindsay.
Really troubling at this time. All right, Pierre Thomas, thanks so much. Many say the key to reopening the country is ultimately testing. And when we come back, we'll take a closer look at all the work that's being done to try to figure out who's been exposed. And the lines continue to swell for so many seeking food and basic necessities. But it was also a great week on Wall Street. So what's the disconnect here? First, our tweet of the day, a message from the mayor of Chicago. Welcome back. The stock market was closed today for Good Friday, giving us all a bit of a breather from the roller coaster ups and downs of recent weeks. So let's take a look by the numbers. The Dow finished up more than 2,600 points from last Friday's close, a rare positive week since the COVID-19 pandemic hit. That 12% rise for the week was the Dow's best performance in more than 4 decades. And the top companies in the S&P 500 are now up 25% from their recent lows in March. The additional $2.3 trillion in new money injected into the economy by the Federal Reserve Thursday helped ease market concerns, as did positive news on fewer new coronavirus cases, both in the U.S. and overseas, sparking optimism that the global economy can recover. But Wall Street isn't Main Street, and the positive news is likely little comfort for the more than 16 million Americans filing unemployment claims in the last 3 weeks, or for the thousands of small businesses struggling to secure loans to keep their businesses afloat. And a reminder that the market is still down around 20% from its highs in February. And some analysts believe further dips to the stock market are still to come as the reality of the economic impact of COVID-19 becomes more clear in the weeks ahead. And we still have a lot more to report on tonight. It may be a violent holiday weekend for millions. Up next, the severe weather threat shaping up for Easter Sunday. And how we can best make sure our children are getting the education they need in these trying times with most children out of school.
For the first time since New York became the epicenter of the nation's coronavirus outbreak, Governor Andrew Cuomo says the number of deaths has dropped slightly.
The key to reopening is going to be testing. I've said that from day one. It's not going to be a light switch where you flip this economy like you flip a light switch.
The average of new hospitalizations and new admissions to intensive care also dropped for another consecutive day in New York. New York, Michigan, Florida, and Illinois are also watching their numbers closely. In Boston, a federal investigation is underway into a rash of coronavirus-related deaths at a home for veterans. In Los Angeles, it's now mandatory to wear face masks in public. Anybody working at an essential business or customers of those businesses now have to wear face coverings by law. President Trump participated in what the White House called an Easter blessing with a Pentecostal preacher, reminding Americans during this holiday week that because of the outbreak, Americans won't be gathering as they usually do.
Though we will not be able to gather together with one another as we normally would on Easter, we can use this sacred time to focus on prayer, reflection, and growing in our personal relationship with God.
Most churches have planned to live stream services. Governors in some states say they will use police officers to enforce social distancing measures. At the Vatican, Pope Francis is leading services this Good Friday where social distancing measures remain in place. The music and Mass streaming and broadcast to worshipers.
A severe weather threat looms over Easter weekend. Texas, already battered by severe storms, now faces potential for wind, hail, and tornadoes. 2 EF0s touched down in Fayetteville, Ohio. Now more than 50 million in the path of a possible tornado outbreak from Texas to the Carolinas, with the Gulf states particularly at risk. Despite a pandemic, the college bribery case against Lori Loughlin and Massimo Giannulli continues. Prosecutors released a bunch of damning material against them, including their daughter's staged rowing photos that they sent to the scam's alleged ringleader, Rick Singer. Overall, Lachlan and Giannulli paid Singer's sham charity $500,000 to falsify athletic portfolios for their daughters to get into USC. Their trial is set for October.
Welcome back. A large part of the country is also on severe weather watch over the holiday weekend. Tornadoes and severe storms ripped through the South. Here's just a bit of the devastation in Arkansas and in Texas. Damaging winds, hail, and intense floods swept in across much of the state, causing a lot of damage. And although it's April, sure doesn't look like it in Maine. Look at that heavy snow blanketing several areas. Let's take a closer look at what to expect over the weekend and what you need to do to stay safe from the storms while in quarantine. ABC News senior meteorologist Rob Marciano has more.
Hey, Lindsay. Good evening to you. On top of all that we have to think about with the COVID-19 safety measures, we do have a significant severe weather threat happening this weekend, pretty much the entire weekend. We already have a severe thunderstorm watch that's posted for West Texas, but this low that's coming out of California, that ejects into the plains tomorrow, and the real show begins really late in the day tomorrow and lasts right through Easter Sunday and even into Monday. So here's how it pans out. I think tomorrow late in the day, San Antonio, Austin, Texas, Dallas, you could see some strong thunderstorms that could very well produce tornadoes, large hail, and some damaging winds. That does cruise through Houston during the overnight hours tomorrow night into Sunday. And then we start to get more in the way of some lower level dynamics, a lot of moisture from the Gulf of Mexico. And out ahead of this front, we could see some supercell thunderstorms that develop, and that means not just tornadoes, but possibly some strong tornadoes that last on the ground for a long time, and those are the scariest kinds. So from central Louisiana right up through the entire state of Mississippi, that's the bullseye, and through Birmingham, Tuscaloosa, Alabama as well, but you can't rule out one in Nashville, Atlanta, back through Tallahassee, north and east of there. We're looking at a flood threat, north and west of there, a snow threat as well. So you're going to want to keep an eye to your local ABC stations. Think about this. If you normally go to a basement like I'm in right now, that's a safe spot. But if you don't have that luxury, you may typically go to a public shelter. Well, those public shelters are likely not open because of COVID-19. So call your local officials, at the very least get an alternate plan to keep you and your family safe with this situation. Again, watch your local ABC stations. And if you don't have that, get yourself a handy-dandy weather radio, turn that on, and it will alert you when dangerous weather heads your way. So we'll keep track of it throughout the weekend. Lindsay, you stay safe from the weather and, of course, the virus. Back to you.
All right, our thanks, Rob. COVID-19 complicating even people responding to severe weather at this point. And tonight, convicted rapist Harvey Weinstein is facing an additional count of sexual assault. Los Angeles County prosecutors announced today the new count is in connection with Weinstein's alleged attack of a woman at a Beverly Hills hotel in 2010. This comes on top of the 4 counts of sexual assault and battery he's already been charged with in Los Angeles. He has pleaded not guilty, and he's awaiting trial there. The former Hollywood mogul was sent to prison in New York for 23 years after he was found guilty on rape and sexual assault charges back in February. He recently overcame the coronavirus. As many have said, the key to reopening the country just may lie in testing, particularly for antibodies. Researchers in California tested thousands of people this week, and our Kaylee Hartung has the latest developments.
Tonight, on the front lines of a key battle in the fight to get America back to work. A line of people in Northern California waiting for an antibody test to determine whether they've been exposed to the coronavirus without knowing it and may now be immune.
The key to reopening is going to be testing.
The antibody testing in California, part of a USC Stanford study, requires just a drop of blood, a simple pinprick. They say it costs about $10 and results are available in about 10 minutes.
$10, 10 minutes per test. And you are gathering incredibly valuable information.
We can do this on a very large scale if we want to.
The federal government has yet to deploy a nationwide test. New York State, the epicenter of the crisis, is developing its own, but they're only able to perform a few thousand tests a week.
It's not enough if you want to reopen on a meaningful scale and reopen quickly. We need an unprecedented mobilization where government can produce these tests in the millions.
Today, Governor Cuomo calling on President Trump to use the Defense Production Act to make private companies produce antibody tests. But today from the White House,
there's not a lot of issues with testing.
The president has downplayed the need for nationwide testing to diagnose COVID-19 or detect whether a person has had the virus and is now possibly immune.
We want to have it, and we're going to see if we have it. Do you need it? No. Is it a nice thing to do? Yes. We're talking about 325 million people, and that's not going to happen.
But Dr. Anthony Fauci says testing is key, and today announced the federal government is closing in on an antibody test.
Within a period of a week or so, we're going to have a rather large number of tests that are available.
President Trump now making this pledge.
We're confident that the production will scale up to tens of millions of tests very quickly.
Our thanks to Kaylee. Parents have certainly been transformed into teachers and principals after K through 12 schools started to close because of this pandemic almost a month ago. Gianni Rodriguez, who we first followed when she started teaching her 4 children a few weeks ago, well, she checked back in with us today to tell us how she's holding up with this new normal.
We're on week 3 of distance learning. Technically, we were on week 4, but we had spring break in between at some point at the end of March, so that was fun. We've got a routine. The kids know what they need to do. They know what time they have to get up and they have to eat breakfast and all those things. But it still, to me, is not getting any easier. I'm back in school myself. My classes started up again. So I've got that on top of work and their school. So I'm now like losing more of my mind than I've already lost. The kids are adjusted pretty well to being at home. And I think a couple of them prefer it. But me, I honestly cannot wait for this to be done. Because Mama's tired. And I just want to go back to everything being normal.
Education struggles are certainly real for so many families right now. For 55 million American children, school is closed. In its place, virtual learning, homeschooling, and for many, way too much screen time. But not all families are equally equipped to navigate this new normal. So for more, we bring in former Secretary of Education Arne Duncan. Thanks so much for joining us. We appreciate it.
Thanks so much for the opportunity.
So with children learning from home, what about families that don't have computers or access to the internet? Are you concerned about increasing the achievement gap, and what should be done?
Well, what this crisis is doing is letting all of us know exactly how unequal access to educational opportunity is today in our country. And if there's any silver lining to this horrible time, is that we have to confront this honestly and courageously together. So the short term, we're seeing amazing innovation. Boston gave out 30,000 devices. My hometown here in Chicago has given out 100,000 devices. San Antonio is doing the same thing. It's not just access to that technology, to the hardware. It's access to the internet and access to Wi-Fi. But we need to reimagine what education looks like and what equal access to educational opportunity looks at the back end of this. We have to close the digital divide once and for all.
And free school lunches are a lifeline for many families, more so now than with unemployment rising. What impact are the school closures having on these children?
Well, I'm talking to school superintendents and those involved in food distribution every single week, including a conference call today. I'm actually blown away by the level of ingenuity, commitment, compassion, empathy. School districts, nonprofits are giving out millions of meals on a daily basis, not just to school children, to their families, to other members in the community. We see unemployment rates skyrocketing every single week. Families that were felt stable a few weeks ago now have had their world turned upside down. Schools aren't just physical buildings in which learning takes place. Schools are social safety nets, and they have turned into massive food distribution centers. That need is growing. It's going to continue to grow. But there's such a seriousness of purpose here. It makes me feel really hopeful about where we're going.
You've pushed in the past states to adopt the Common Core standards, which relies heavily on testing, obviously. How will that work this year? I mean, should schools put all those exams on hold?
Well, to be clear, it doesn't rely heavily on testing. Common Core just means having high standards where students who are hitting those standards will be on track to go on to college and be successful and not take remedial classes. So what should schools do about end-of-year assessments? No one really knows. My honest opinion is that people are not going to go back to a physical school building this year. So it doesn't make any sense whatsoever to do those assessments. If we are able to reopen school by the summer, I would love to see lots and lots of kids around the country have the chance to go back to summer school. If that's not possible, we'll have to keep the online learning going through the summer. And then if we go back to our physical buildings in the fall, maybe we extend the 2021 school year and go into next summer. If I could also add, the academic piece is huge, but I would argue now more than ever, probably more important is supporting our children socially and emotionally. And the amount of stress they're experiencing, the amount of trauma, taking care of students' social and emotional needs, making sure they're fed, they're not hungry. That, for me, is the absolute priority as we're speaking here today.
I just want to underscore a point that you just made. And a lot of students and teachers alike are under the impression that perhaps they may be going back to school in May. You think that that's not likely?
I would love that to be the case. I just don't know if that's realistic or not. And again, we have to be planning for every contingency. So we have to plan to go back to school in May. We have to plan to go back to school in June or July. We have to plan to go back to school in September.
What do you think that the lasting impact on education is of these few months of outside of school? And how should schools consider those who are going to advance to the next grade, for example?
Well, yeah, they'll have to think that through. But let me sort of step back that in every crisis, and this is a terrible crisis, and we are not through it yet, so we have to stay focused on getting through this crisis and keeping people alive first and foremost. In every crisis, there's an opportunity to think about things differently and to reimagine differently. And let me be really clear. For me, the goal should not be to go back to what was there before, to go back to quote-unquote normal, because quite frankly, that normal wasn't good enough for far too many children across this country. So how do we take our educational system to the next level? How do we think about, as we talked earlier, about closing the digital divide? Can we come back not to the old normal, which wasn't good enough, but to a new normal that is much more fair and just and equitable, and where children across this country, every single child, has access to a high-quality education? That has to be our aspiration, and I hope we have the courage to ask those hard questions and answer them together in a way that benefits every single child and ultimately benefits our nation.
And just want to double back to, again, the idea of schools reopening. Do you think that that should be something that is a local decision or a national guideline?
Well, I think this pandemic, this virus doesn't know what district it's in or what city it's in or what county it's in or what state it's in. It doesn't know any borders or barriers. And so we have to work together. I hate to close schools. When I led the Chicago Public Schools for 7.5 years, we never took a single day off. We never had a snow day. We never had a strike. But this is a different time. And our first priority is to keep people alive. And so it is absolutely critical that we physical distance. I don't like the term social distancing. We need to stay connected socially more than ever, but we have to maintain our physical distance. And until we're past this, it is life-saving for everybody to keep the schools closed and keep people at home. And that's hard. You know, my wife and I have 2 children at home, and we're all adjusting to this homeschooling thing together. But for the foreseeable future, we need to keep our physical distance and let this thing run its course, flatten this curve. And when it is safe to go back, when it is safe, we should go back, but not a day before then.
We are all adjusting, that is for sure. I can't believe that in Chicago you never had a snow day. But Arnie Duncan.
I didn't believe it. We had lots of snow, but no days off.
We appreciate that. Make sure those kids are educated. All right, Arnie Duncan, we thank you so much for your time and your insight. Well, most colleges and universities have now suspended in-person classes for the remainder of the semester and forced students to quickly move off campus. But in the days between cancellation and moving out, it then dawned on some seniors that they're not actually going to get to participate in a traditional commencement ceremony. So many of them decided we'll hold our own DIY ceremonies, or faux commencements as they're now called. We caught up with a few of those seniors. Take a look.
We put like a small Facebook event together, and really initially I only meant it to be, it was like sort of a half-joking event. Commencement is certainly something I've been looking forward to. I think what's special about it is it's a place for like your family to come and gather and celebrate you. And just for there to be like a sort of ritual to it can really help with the like confusion of leaving somewhere.
I don't think I've ever cried so much in one day, just to think that like I will probably won't be able to see these people ever again because of this whole pandemic. Corona commencement just kind of reinstalled my hope and my positivity in this whole situation, because like, yeah, we didn't get the official commencement where we got like all of our cool caps and gowns, but it meant so much just to be in like in a little forum in front of our bookstore with all of our friends.
I asked one of my friends, hey, can we do this together? And so I created a Facebook group and I started sharing this with the student body. For me particularly, was a very touch moment, because coming here as the first openly trans woman at Wellesley College, I wanted to graduate. Like, I envisioned this moment for so long. I wanted to walk the stage, be there with my friends, be there with the people that I love. So it was very meaningful to me, and I know it was very meaningful to other people, especially for low income and first generation students, immigrant students. This, I think, only demonstrates how a community together can make things happen, like, brilliantly.
A little pomp and circumstance any way they can get it. And when we come back, some who are working from home are not letting quarantine cramp their style. The outfit inspiration you never knew you needed. And before we go to break, we leave you with this peaceful moment. The U.S. Department of Interior posting this virtual hike in Oregon.
There's a blaze of light in every word. It doesn't matter which you heard.
That beautiful voice that you're hearing is an Ohio doctor, not only treating his patients, but trying to uplift them as well. And one Walmart executive recently mentioned an increase in sales for tops, but not bottoms, suggesting that people are only concerned from the waist up or whatever can be seen on Zoom. From plaid pajamas to frivolous frocks, or those who even bother to make it out of their PJs, what are you wearing while working from home? We want to know. When every day is Dress Down Friday, or maybe sometimes it's Turn Up Tuesday, and the biggest decision after you get up is choosing your getup, we're posing the age-old red carpet question of who are you wearing as you strut the catwalk from the closet to the couch for the conference call at noon. Bedroom chic, pajama pants, or the classic sweatsuit. Loungewear at its finest. Virtually an international competition of who wore it best. Slippers are in, and robes are making a huge comeback. A duvet cover shawl? Yes, wearing bedspreads these days is actually a thing. While some are bringing sexy back, others are going for a revival of the 80s. At WFH Fits, aka Working From Home Outfits, is an Instagram page entirely devoted to the new executive uniforms of the season. An entire thread about threads. Instagram has become a virtual meeting place for an entire community of strangers using haute couture to combat the lockdown blues with style. Even famed designer Isaac Mizrahi posted this perseveration over pants.
I don't know about you, but I cannot face another pair of yoga pants or pull-on pants or lounge pants. I just can't. I'm kind of thinking like a three-piece suit, a really tight suit, which will not be a problem right now.
From monochromatic loungewear to towel turbans, and yes, the ultimate accessory, a baby on your hip. Because that's how we roll these days. Even man's best friend is getting in on the work-from-home action. If clothing were a mullet, this would be it. Business on the top, party on the bottom. Because no one's really going to see what's below your computer screen after all. So go ahead, unleash. Let your inner tiger king out. It's a world where only the outfittest survive. Aspiring designer and fabric shops are closed? No problem. She's got her sister covered, sewing together old towels and bedsheets, echoing the latest runway styles of Paris from the hardwood floors of home. Even the grande dame herself, editor-in-chief of Vogue magazine Anna Wintour, posted her stay chic, stay-at-home classic knit sweater and scarf ensemble, and of course, sunglasses, a must. From swanky to sexy, dappy to debonair, frills or no frills, go ahead and work it from home. Don't be afraid to rock those tiered ruffled sleeves with boots to boot and some snazzy fringe pants to bring it all together. And heels? Really? So last season. Are we still even doing that? Don't let cabin fever hamper your style. Elegance is a frame of mind, and these days comfort reigns supreme. And what struck me on this site wasn't all that snazzy, but a pair of socks, blue ones, for blue sky thinking, because there are sunny days ahead. And before we go tonight, the image of the day. Amid the pandemic, newborn babies at a hospital in Thailand are being given mini face shields like the one that you're looking at right now, a way to give a little extra protection to those adorable bundles of joy. And they're pretty cute, too. Not so sure about fashionable, but thanks so much for joining us tonight. I'm Lindsay Davis. Finally tonight, thousands of people, they lost their lives this week, and behind each of those statistics is a name and a face. Well, tonight we remember those whose lives were cut short way too soon. Good night.